Howdy, kids. It is me, Bob Harris, senior editor, footballdiehards.com. Time for our weekly chit chat. Ask me anything, however you like to call it. And you can't ask me anything. We're here to answer questions, discuss issues, kind of get you ready. This is the 2022 season is coming ahead, right? And so we all need to start preparing as any responsible fantasy manager would do. It is time. We all know this, right? And if you're here, you definitely know this. And we'll give it a few minutes to let it kind of build up a little bit. And maybe in the interim, touch base on some of the news. Last week, we talked about some of the quarterback dramas that were ongoing, and we got a little more information on some of those even, immediately after we talked last week. The latest one, I don't like to be the TMZ of the world, but some of this is TMZ-ish stuff, right? And so Aaron Rodgers has split from his fiance, the actress, who lived in Denver. And that was where the whole genesis of this, Rodgers to Denver story, started gaining a little steam last year, right? When he was, his future was uncertain, etc. So they've split up. I think the hiring of Nathaniel Hackett in Denver probably means a little more to this situation than where his ex-fiance has had and a house, those kind of things. But just a little something added to the overall. Let me do a little social media work here. So added to the whole story, right? A little tidbit out today that maybe Tom Brady was not really entirely happy. With maybe Bruce Arians was micromanaging a little bit. If you remember, Arians had and hello, JR, I'll get to the questions here in a minute. Arians had an Achilles injury, right? If you saw him in the season, late in the season, they had a little special ice pack rigged up so he could, make it through the whole game stuff. But apparently he would spend his early mornings getting rehab on his Achilles. Hi, Timothy. And so then he would go in, and so while he was getting his rehab, Brady and Byron Leftwich would work on the game plan, and then Arians would show up a couple hours later and red line all of it and just say, throw all this out. And apparently that led to a little bit of tension within the top tier of management there, and I include Brady in the top tier of management there, of course, because he was. So just interesting little tidbits. Some of the other things we talked about last week, and just to reiterate, teams are showing interest. A couple teams are doing their diligence on, whether it's Deshaun Watson seems to be prominently mentioned with both Denver and Tampa Bay. Makes sense. I still have an eye on Carolina for Deshaun Watson. Denver's going to need a quarterback, whoever it is. Russell Wilson being mentioned prominently in some of these places, including Tampa Bay. Some interesting talk about, maybe the Eagles or Giants being interested in Russell Wilson. I don't know how realistic any of that is. At this point, we're kind of tossing darts. We're just building up the steam here, right? It's just now gaining the momentum, and the dramas will get ongoing. Daniel Jones said this week that, even with a vote of confidence from the owner, John Mara, who said basically they haven't done enough to help Daniel Jones, improve, he is not taking that, and he's kind of, rolling with he still needs to improve. He is right. Despite the vote of confidence, he needs to get better. Doug Peterson building a staff that seems to be really focused on, building Trevor Lawrence up. Also in Jacksonville, Travis Etienne says he's making recovery in his progress in his recovery from the Liz Frank surgery. He says he's at 80-85%, doing a lot of physical activities, etc. More quarterback stuff. Kevin O'Connell, the new coach of the Vikings, excited to work with Kirk Cousins until he's not, right? I mean, my expectations is Kirk Cousins will be there, will be a Viking this year. I have no reason to believe that won't be the case, but funnier things have happened. There apparently are teams that need quarterbacks out there. You'll be surprised to learn, as we've discussed over and over. New Orleans is another team, with a huge hole at quarterback. So some of the items we had discussed last week. One other thing that kind of caught my attention, it seems to be the ongoing thing. Marquise Brown is the latest person to scrub their social media. People read a lot into that. I'm not reading much into that just yet. Lamar Jackson has resumed throwing. Who he's throwing to? Rashad Bateman and James Prochet. That's interesting. I think Antonio Brown was hanging around with him too. So interesting there. By the way, a lot of the talk of Tennessee maybe being in the hunt for quarterbacks or, interested in moving on from Ryan Tannehill. They are not, because they can't afford to. And this is the issue for a lot of these teams, wanting to make changes at quarterback or, who might otherwise be in the mix. So there would have to be some significant contractual shifts for some of these things to happen. So we'll watch for those. They're not entirely impossible, right? And I think, as I mentioned last week, the thing for me with Aaron Rodgers, Indy, yes. I mean, Carson Wentz, Robert Taylor just jumps in. Man, Carson Wentz, I thought it was interesting, their immediate pressers after the season. Neither Chris Ballard, the GM, nor Frank Reich, the coach, were very committal, about saying that their starting quarterback was on the roster. I saw something yesterday that kind of made sense as well. I mean, they really value their draft picks. Would they really move on after 1 year, given the investment in draft picks they made, because that was their, Carson Wentz tipped the playing time requirements that were, added a first round pick to that mix. So, they're out a fair amount. So maybe they try and figure it out. A lot of times, Robert, and, everyone out there, I think when we hear things in the moment after losses or Colts season ended on a horribly disappointing note, right? Maybe that's not the best time to take everything at face value. That said, these things are said for a reason, and we can go back to even in Los Angeles, where after the 2020 season, everybody sounded pretty sour on Jared Goff, and you're thinking, wow, what can they do? They're really in a miserable situation in terms of contract and things like that, and they worked something out. And here we are talking a week after, almost the 6 days after the Super Bowl, at the Rams won with Matthew Stafford at the helm. I mean, the Rams don't have a draft pick, a first-round pick until 2024 because of this, but they have a Super Bowl title. So, it's fair to say that there will be teams out there that are interested in following that pattern, right? Because the NFL is a copycat league. I know that's a cliche, but it's a cliche for a reason, because it's 100% true. When people see some success. Well, look no further than the Sean McVay coaching tree, right? With now added to by Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota right now. I mean, when people see that level of success coming to a program, they're going to be quick to copy it. So unless Snead pushed all his chips in, and like other teams maybe did too. And Kyler Murray, another guy who we've, we talked about a little bit last week because he scrubbed his social media, etc. He kind of came back and said, he had a little comment on that, and he's not going anywhere. Kyler Murray is not playing for anyone but the Cardinals this season. We'll see what happens after that, but he needs to play better. So that's the answer for a lot of these quarterbacks, including Carson Wentz. The question is, are they capable of playing better? I think in Wentz's case, it's a fair question, man. He makes some really horrible judgment errors. Who would you rather have, Carson Wentz or Jared Goff? That's a horrifying question, right? So we're gonna do start over the course of the coming weeks, and JR wanted to ask about the one and dones. I did a few for the first time this year and really enjoyed them. They definitely made watching playoff games. I agree, but not sure what he learned. Do you have any general strategies for both one quarterback and two quarterback playoff one and dones? I haven't done a two quarterback one and done. I'll be honest with you. I've done the one quarterback, and that's tricky enough, right? I mean, and I got hosed. I'm gonna admit this year, man. My first week went completely off the rails, and some of these things happen when you have number one seeds getting knocked out quickly and things like that. Sooner than you expect. So I always try to play one division at the onesie positions so that I at least have options at the end. This year, that didn't work out for me. So that's generally my strategy. So I might have to rethink it a little bit, JR. I get what you're saying. I mean, and in a two quarterback, man, that's nigh on impossible to me. I would have to give that some considerable thought. Because, man, it's hard enough to make sure you get to the end with a quarterback, let alone with two viable options at the position. That'd be pretty tough. So I'm going to have to think about that. How did you do it, JR? Throw it in there. Tell me kind of how you ended up and what you experienced. That'll be interesting. By the way, if you come to these chats, and again, we'll do this every Saturday about noon Eastern. I will miss some Saturdays. But for the most part, we'll kind of keep this going and discuss various things. But, subscribe to the channel, hit your notification button. We send out an email from the website. The website is footballdiehards.com. You will find all kinds of stuff there ongoing. We're year-round on the football. Right now, featured, you'll find John Lobb's rookie previews are coming in. And we have the quarterbacks and the running backs part one. John does a great job on these, has for a number of years. So he'll have some more stuff coming in this week. So there'll be some fresh stuff up there this week. And we'll have more stuff. Always an constant stream of news, notes, and other good stuff. So what I wanted to start doing was start laying the groundwork on the way too early rankings. And this came to my mind because Sirius XM hit us all up, hosts. I'm also a host on Sirius XM, if you didn't know this. You can watch me or listen to me. You can't watch me. We watch each other on the Zoom, but you can't see us. On the Football Diehards program right now, if you're watching this Saturday live, I'll be on from 5 to 7 Eastern time with Mike Dempsey. I'll be on again Sunday, 5 to 7 Eastern time. That's the plan going forward. Mondays, I'll be on, I think it's, 10 to midnight. And also just got a confirmation from a guest for Monday night. So my friend Lawrence Jackson from NBC Sports Edge will be coming on, and Matthew Berry's Fantasy Life. He's a great addition to the fantasy community. Love having him on the show. So he'll come on, and we may discuss some of the things we're discussing here. Also, you can hit me up this week. I'm going to be hosting the FSWA Awards, something that is near and dear to my heart, on Thursday, I believe. You can check the time and listings on your channel for that. I don't know the exact time. And Wednesday night, I'll be on Fantasy Dirt this week, so with Michael Fabiano. So check that out. Or maybe I'm on with Amber Theo Harris. Maybe Fabiano's off. I don't know. I'm on. That's all that matters, right? That's the important part. But Sirius hit us up, all the hosts, to do our initial top 10 rankings. And so I thought this might be a good opportunity for us to get the ball rolling and throw those out and kind of discuss. I'll throw some things out. If you have questions or thoughts, would love to hear them on these. So let's start with the quarterbacks. And I think, I'll kind of go through how they reflect on, my rankings, or how my rankings are different from their rankings. And there we have them up on the screen. You can see them now for the Sirius hosts. I believe there's always some outliers and some guys that didn't make it in. I may address those if I have a moment. I'm aware of who they are at quarterback. But Josh Allen, I think, got 77% of the votes as the number one. Makes perfect sense. Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, coming off a very disappointing season. Joe Burrow at 5. I mean, a little bit forward leaning right there, right? It seems a little bit to me. I did not vote him there. I'll go through my rankings and compare him. Matthew Stafford at 9, I think is fair. Said the guy who also ranked him at 9. And Jalen Hurts at number 10, and I think that is also fair. Some of the notable names not in there. I think Russell Wilson not being there is interesting. Probably less to do with the uncertainty about his situation than maybe just about his poor play this year. So we'll see how that one plays out. And also another guy that my co-host on Sirius had in his top 10, Trey Lance, is someone, look, it's not unreasonable. When I draft, and we talk about this all the time, Kyler, JR is nervous. We're going to talk about Kyler again. I would agree with that. But he does, if he started running again, he'd have that upside. But, something that I like to do a lot when I'm drafting is maybe reach a little bit for upside, like maybe draft a Trey Lance a little early, a player that I think might have that, super athletic rushing upside along with the passing upside. I mean, so, maybe reach for that kind of player a little bit. And then there's going to be guys, and there are guys that aren't on this list that are going to be perfectly serviceable, right? I mean, we mentioned Kirk Cousins, in Minnesota. As long as he's locked in, he'll be a great player. I think he finished 11 last season. Derek Carr, always viable. I mean, there's a range of guys that you could play that would serve as a fallback in case there was some kind of horrible drop-off or unexpected failure on the part of Trey Lance. And I know Joe Montana said on Radio Row at the Super Bowl this week that he thinks the 49ers should keep Jimmy Garoppolo another season, and maybe Trey Lance isn't ready, and that's maybe true, but I think it doesn't matter. We're going to see him either way. So Allen, Mahomes, and Allen last season, I guess, was the number one scorer in total points. I'm going to use a scoring system from Sirius, a Sirius league I played in for the purposes of this conversation, just because it fits in with their rankings. I'm guessing that people mostly who did this probably adhered to those or at least followed them. I don't know that it matters that much, but just to kind of keep it, copacetic there. So Allen was by far and away, and not only in total points, but in average points per game, he was the highest scoring quarterback at 22.6 points per game. That's pretty damn good. Now, I also vote him number one. He is my number one quarterback going into the season. Is there reason for concern with him? Not a lot, right? Other than Brian Daboll leaving. And I think that's something that we'll have to see how it plays out. I mean, the people who cover that team on a daily basis put a lot of emphasis on the fact that Brian Daboll's week-to-week game plans, the adjustments he made week to week, were a big factor in the offensive success there. And that also he was a huge factor in Allen's, rise over the last three seasons, from a pretty unpolished product coming in to, certainly a more accurate product. And obviously the rushing ability and using that, they've done a great job of that. So Ken Dorsey takes over as offensive coordinator. Ken Dorsey, you remember him, a former quarterback, great college quarterback, and serviceable pro, did his time as a backup for many years. Known for being a really smart guy, but he had been the quarterback's coach there, also had a hand in Josh Allen's rise, right, as the position coach. And apparently Josh Allen has a really good relationship with Ken Dorsey, endorsed him as the replacement. There was some talk that maybe Dorsey would leave with Daboll to be the offensive coordinator in Buffalo. That was not the case. So I think this is kind of a best case situation, right? I'd be perfectly comfortable drafting him. So what is the range? Dempsey and I did our first mock draft. We kind of do a lot of mocks on the Monday night show on Sirius. Let me grab that and just kind of see where he went. I think he went early in the fourth round. Yeah, went first pick of the fourth round. Josh Allen did. I think that's a fair range for him, right? Quarterback starting to go in the fourth round doesn't seem too off the hook there. Patrick Mahomes also went in that round, about the fifth pick. So those were the only two quarterbacks we started out with a 4-round mock. So it kind of followed these rankings. Patrick Mahomes, why are we still drafting him number 2? He wasn't that good this year, or he wasn't number 2, certainly. Man, it's a consistently high-end production, right, over the course of time. You know what you're getting with him. I ranked him number 2 on my listings. He is number 2 here. So I'm so far reflecting what the series rankings are. Mahomes' average per game in their scoring system, 325 total points behind Tom Brady, who is not going to play, they say, and Justin Herbert. So, I mean, right in line here. But the average points per game were solid. I think, what was his average per game? 20 points per game, more than suitable. I think the consistency over time, he's been super good, super productive. It's a very explosive offense. He has great weapons around him. And maybe they'll add to that. My guess is at some point they will find a number 2 receiver that can maybe provide a little consistent higher floor than the number 2s they've been rotating. Yeah, JR, I'll get to the Saints. It's gonna be a mess, man. So let me just do that now, because I mean we don't know, right? Could they bring Jameis Winston back? It's possible. Taysom Hill's an open question because of his Liz Frank surgery. And also, he seemed to be more of a Sean Payton product, the new coach having. Dennis Allen, there's continuity there. Pete Carmichael remains the offensive coordinator. So there'll be some continuity there. But do they believe in Taysom Hill the way Sean Payton did? I think Trevor Siemian's probably out of the picture. So don't be surprised if they're in the mix for some of these guys. And if they suddenly emerge as a realistic candidate for some of these guys that we've been talking about, whether it's Deshaun Watson or Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers or any of these guys. So that'll be something we watch. So number 1 and number 2, I'm a total lockstep with. I'm also in lockstep with number 3, Justin Herbert. I love this guy. I just think he's a great player. He averaged 21 points a game. Super solid. I mean, he had some clinkers this year that maybe weren't my cup of, so like there would be games where you think, man, this guy looks like the best young quarterback in football, and games where he looks like just a young quarterback, right? I think that'll get dialed in over time, right? So I'm perfectly fine picking him there. Lamar Jackson at number 4. I also had Lamar Jackson at number 4. Don't think that's out of line. Expecting a rebound season, but hoping you get a little value maybe from people who invested in him or just, don't pay as close attention to maybe why someone didn't come up, as solid as they expected, or why the disappointments, the injuries were obviously a big thing. But it's also worth saying, I mean, I want to look at the numbers here. There were games where he wasn't really good. I mean, he had a 17-point game, 11-point game, 14-point game, an 8-point game. I mean, he had some games where he didn't entirely show up. So expecting a rebound from him, I think, is more than reasonable. Sniper thinks I have, I'm not as high. So Joe Burrow is the first one where I differ, right? And they have him at number 5. That's overall. So, I think that's a little high. And I guess it's because, here's why I think it's high, Sniper. And you could chime in. Basically, the comment is Burrow should be higher than Jackson, is the thought there. I don't know. So here's the thing for me. Given the opportunity, when they were running the ball well, they were more than satisfied not to go with a pass-heavy approach. There were games where I think, Joe Burrow didn't have that super high-end attempts, right? 19, 20, below 30 anyway. Attempts, 19 completions, I think. But I think that's the thing. If they can control the ball and run well, I think they're perfectly happy doing that. Obviously, we saw their defense against the Rams. They play a little better defense than maybe we all give them credit for or gave them credit for until late in the season when we started seeing it on a weekly basis, the adjustments they'd make at halftime. We saw them really stout against the run, that defense. They may be able to hold some teams in check a little bit. And so I think, to me, that's one of the reasons that, and Joe Burrow's words themselves, Sniper, I think if you look that, like he said at one point, like, look, we want to be a run-first team, but we can make plays when we have to. I think that's what they are. And so part of that is they will make plays. I want to check his average per game scoring. 18 points, a little below the 20. I mean, I get it. He's not really a super mobile quarterback. I think that's why, Sniper, people are not as high on him maybe as you are, or maybe not as high on him as they are on Lamar Jackson. I think we've all learned that mobile quarterbacks, give you that little edge in the average scoring. They just, they build that floor a little higher. So not against Burrow. I don't have him way out of line with what you see here. I think I have him at number 8. So I'm a little lower than on him, but perfectly fine. I think 5 is high. I think 8 is about the sweet spot for me. The next piece is for me, Kyler Murray. I have him at 5. I'm a little nervous about him too, but I'm going to give him a chance. The athleticism's there. Wish he would run the ball more. I do think the Cardinals are going to make an effort to get him to pick up the pace. Certainly Cliff Kingsbury and Murray both kind of on notice after a horrible finish to the season. The thing that I liked about Murray last year when he played, and he missed the games, that was a bit of an issue. He seemed to evolve as a passer to me, right? And I think, the evidence of that for me is the target shares, most notably for DeAndre Hopkins. It seemed like in the previous year, I mean, it was really easy just to throw the ball to DeAndre Hopkins every damn time. This year, he seemed to look and go through his reads a little more effectively. I think that's a sign of evolution in him as a passer. Now just bring back the run a little bit. And I think that's, this is a realistic range for him. Look, I'm nervous about all these guys, right? So I get the thoughts, JR 16-16, Kyler makes me nervous. He's small. We've all heard the talk, the Chris Mortensen report on Super Sunday that people within the organization think he's not maybe as mature as they'd like, all those kind of things, right? And so, they're putting that out there for a reason. They're hoping to change that because he's going to be their quarterback, right? He's not going somewhere heading into his 5th-year option. I think Darren Urban from the team's website said it best. He said, I'm not 100% certain that Kyler Murray will be the quarterback this year, but I'm like 99.9% certain, and I am too. Beyond that, it's an open case, and it's an open case for Cliff Kingsbury. They need to finish stronger to keep their jobs. Aaron Rodgers is at 7, also on my list 7, and Scott Kobe chimes in. By the way, big high stakes player here, Scott Kobe, and also did quite well on his prop bets in this last in Super Sunday. Congratulations on that. And then, hi, Andrea, how are you? Do I think if Rodgers and Adams are back, he could be a top 5? Absolutely, 100%. I think that. And do I think Kyler still spreads it around and dials it back? So I think maybe I addressed that. It just seems like he has become, he's evolving. So I'm hoping that's not just a narrow band, or it seemed like a course over time last season. And so with Burrow's weapons for next year, I don't disagree that he has the ability to be higher. I just don't know that he will be every week, and they need to make some improvements on the offensive line. But I think what it goes back to is what I said. I think my leeriness, I think top 5 is high end. I think it's totally realistic. It's not where I'm at. Part of it is the current offensive line. They put a lot of pressure on him. I don't think every week him getting pressured the way he got pressured, as we saw down the stretch, is a good thing. And they do have huge weapons. So there are going to be weeks where his numbers spike up. There were also weeks last year where he didn't show up at all. He still had those high-end weapons. So, I get it. They're all going to evolve and get better. So totally within the range of possible outcomes. Just for me, I'm a little lower on it because I don't think he's the first option. I don't think the big plays down the field are the primary objective here. I think the running the ball with Joe Mixon is the primary objective. And when they need the big plays, they'll go for him. So, and obviously, if you're sitting here, DJ, and you're saying, I think he's going to be, should be higher than Lamar, well, obviously you'll have that opportunity to draft him and make me look stupid. That's the best part about fantasy football, right? That's the part we love. But this is my kind of default right now. Dak Prescott at number 8 on the overall list from Sirius here, the Sirius hosts. I have Prescott at 6. My reasoning, we saw him the season before when he was hurt. He was scoring at a phenomenal pace. Part of that was because he was way more willing to tuck it in and run. He may have to tuck it in and run, right? Because we don't know who the weapons are going to be. Michael Gallup is a free agent. Dalton Schultz is a free agent. Amari Cooper, suddenly a lot of chatter about whether he returns or they want more out of him. They've certainly put him on notice, Amari Cooper. And it's not entirely possible. There was talk of a trade last year. So not entirely, outside the realm of possibility that he's not around. So they may have a revamp of the receiving corps. Either way, thinking that a year removed from that horrible injury that he suffered in week 6 against the Giants last year, that he will be more willing to tuck it up and run, and he's more than capable of doing that. So I have him at 6. I have Rodgers at 7. I have Burrow at 8. I have Matthew Stafford at 9, just like these guys do. I think that's not an unreasonable expectation. Jalen Hurts, I have at 10 as well. Thinking he goes higher or he finishes higher, not unrealistic at all, right? He has that rushing equity. I don't know, DJ. You should trust your view. My hunches are mine. Yours are yours. It's a fair, so here's the thing. We're picking a top 10, right? And this is a tier of that top 10. Anybody finishing within this top 10 anywhere, thinking we can predict the future with that kind of granularity that we could sit here in February and say, Joe Burrow number 5. Well, we probably can't do that. So what we do, though, is we set this baseline using these rankings, the initial thoughts. It was the entire group of hosts at Sirius who participated in this. And so I'm giving you mine, but these will certainly evolve, right? Based on the draft, based on free agency. You had the one question in here, Scott Kobe, do I think Rodgers and Adams if Adams is back, he's the top 5. If he's in Green Bay and Devontae Adams is back, thinking he ends up as quarterback 1 is not insane. You look at the numbers last year. Throughout that initial game, right, against the Saints, where he had literally 1 fantasy point, right? It was a horrible game. He still ended up averaging well over 20 points a game. So yes, I think these are the kind of things that we're setting the baseline here. And Scott wanted to know outside the top 10 quarterbacks we could sneak in. I think Trey Lance is the one I mentioned. I think that's the one in the voting reflected. He got votes. Russell Wilson certainly could do that depending. I think the Seahawks, if he remains a Seahawk, they expect him to bounce back. Kirk Cousins playing at that level, totally not unrealistic. Remember, Ryan Tannehill until this year was up in that top 10 the previous, 2 or 3 years. So, I think there's a number of guys who are capable of it. Do I expect them to? Like, the Baker Mayfields of the world, the Trevor Lawrences of the world, the Tua Tagovailoas? No. But entirely possible. Funny things happen. But I think this is a pretty solid top 10. Jalen Hurts is one of the things I've talked to beat writers from Philadelphia. The Eagles have planted their flag on him. They think he's their guy. They say he's their guy, unlike in Indianapolis where Carson Wentz is, as we talked about earlier, and Timothy, who was it, mentioned that, really threw that out there. And it's true, man. They're not as sold on them. Robert Taylor threw that out there, they've totally not bought in on that. Again, I still think most likely outcome is he remains the quarterback there. Funny thing about quarterbacks, you might have one that you don't entirely like. Is there a better one out there that you can realistically acquire? That's where the questions come in. I think for Indy, that's going to be a troublesome aspect for them, especially given the draft capital they put into it and how they value their draft capital, right? That's a big deal. It shouldn't be overlooked that Chris Ballard has a great deal of confidence in his drafting. They felt like they were a quarterback away. Maybe they make a move for one of these big name guys, and that's how they move past that. I'm sure, that ownership there, Jim Irsay would love nothing more. And I think, anytime they can figure this out, the ownership is going to be on board with making this kind of push. So there we have it. Some of the other guys, I think Trey Lance got a vote. Trey Lance got a number of votes to be in the top 10. Could Justin Fields sneak in? Sure, absolutely. Got a new coaching staff. We'll see what the offense, how focused they are on getting some help for him on the offensive line. Again, I think that's an issue for Joe Burrow as well. The Bengals know this, though. They mentioned it numerous times since the Super Bowl. And honestly, it doesn't take a football genius to realize, double-digit hits on your quarterback in a game, is not, you're not going to get the best case outcome every single week on that. So they'll work on that. And I think for me, though, the thing about Burrow is just, not a super mobile quarterback. So we look at these guys. Aaron Rodgers doesn't run as much as he used to run. But still very mobile. Dak Prescott mobile. Matthew Stafford, not so mobile, right? Jalen Hurts mobile. So Daniel Jones, if they fix the line, I have in the past been, if not the engineer, certainly the conductor of the Daniel Jones hype train. And I'm not alone in that, whether it's Michael Fabiano, my co-host on Dirt, my friend Marcus Grant from NFL Network. We have celebrated, the possibilities of Daniel Jones. Look, he looks like he could play, right? You watch him. He's got a big arm. He's mobile. He can run. As long as you don't ask him to run all the way to the end zone, he might fall down a trip. We saw that. But yeah, so they do need to fix the offensive line. But exactly the point I was making, DJ. So, and like all of a sudden he has a coach who had a great deal of success with a quarterback with some of the similar attributes. Not the same. I'm not saying Daniel Jones is Josh Allen, right? But he does have, as DJ, exactly. He does say what DJ has, big arm and can run. So a little protection, a little better scheming. Clearly the offense last couple of years. And that's why the Giants have said, I mentioned at the top, John Mara, we have failed Daniel Jones. We have not done the things he needs to make him a good quarterback. I agree with that. Also, I think he needs to be better. Scott Kobe asking about Derek Carr with Josh McDaniels there. I think this is not a bad thing. I think Derek Carr is, annually, I don't want to say disrespected, but overlooked, right? And I get why, but he's generally speaking has been a serviceable fantasy quarterback, right? I think this year he finished maybe out just right around 13. Where did he finish in the Diehards rankings? Let me look here on the season. I know in the league I'm using for the scoring system, he finished 13. Finished 12 at Football Diehards in our scoring system rankings for the season. He's serviceable. And thinking that they might get a little more out of him with Josh McDaniels in there figuring out the offense, I don't think that's a totally unreasonable prediction either. He'll be a guy that if for me, and he always is though, if I wait on quarterbacks and he's dangling out there in the double-digit rounds, as he almost certainly will be, maybe that's the kind of player I take to make sure I get a Trey Lance, and I'll reach a little bit on a Trey Lance. Or maybe I have a hunch that Justin Fields is going to pick up the pace this year, right? But I need a steady Eddie behind him. Maybe Derek Carr is that steady Eddie type of player, and I think we're always looking for those guys. I could play Ryan Tannehill in that role, Russell Wilson if he goes cheap. Once you get out of that range, it seems like the list of steady Eddies is lesser this year than it has been in past years. But anyhow, so yes, I do think there's room for improvement there. There are times when Carr looks amazing, And there are times where he looks like a lost baby deer, right? Just can't figure it out. So they need to add some weapons around him, though. They need to get some help on the outside of wide receiver, and I bet they find that. All right, let's move on to the running back position. A lot of predictable picks here, and some that will certainly be interesting to all of you. Not the least of which will be the top of the board, and the Christian McCaffrey is going to be of interest as well, always. So their rankings, if you're looking away from the screen, Jonathan Taylor, first overall, no surprise, right? I think that's the least surprising outcome. Derrick Henry, for me, this was a tougher decision. So far, this mirrors mine. In fact, the first 3 or 4 picks mirror mine. Austin Eckler, Dalvin Cook is next at 4. Najee Harris at 5. Joe Mixon at 6. Christian McCaffrey at 7. Javonte Williams, a little aggressive at 8, I think, but I'm kind of with that. We're all hoping Melvin Gordon goes away. We don't know that he will. Alvin Kamara at 9. Nick Chubb at 10. These reflect my rankings pretty closely. I have Taylor at 1, Henry at 2, Eckler at 3. I have McCaffrey at 4, though, and we'll talk about it. We'll chop that up. And Scott Kobe is already thinking he was a little low. I think he was, too. All right, we're talking about a guy who, when he was healthy, I get it. The fact that we're saying when he was healthy is a red flag for many people in general. But he was averaging about 30 points a game, and he's like capable of being that player and a half. So I'm willing to take a little bit of a risk on that. I mean, we already were. So drafting him 1 overall last year, and look how that worked out. So I think, I'll start back at the top, though. Taylor and Henry, you could make a pretty strong argument, I think. Well, I think I could, that Henry could be number 1, right? I mean, just look at his points. Let's look at the scoring per game. 23 points a game. That is in the league, for the Sirius league that I'm in, that's the highest scoring running back in football, right? I realize he did not play all the games, and maybe it would have gone down if he played all the games. Okay, sure. To 20, all right, I'll take that. That still would have left him in the top 3, right? So I just think the way that offense is designed, if he stays healthy. And so let's talk a little bit about my injury agnosticity, because that's what I am. I'm an injury agnostic. I don't think players who are hurt this year are necessarily going to get hurt next year. I just don't. Because, I mean, anyone could get hurt. You look at, say, a player like Saquon Barkley. If you watched his ankle injury this year, what a stupid freak accident. Derrick Henry, he stepped wrong. I mean, is it because of heavy usage? I don't think that's the case. You would have a hard time, to me, finding demonstrable evidence that the workload building up to that is the reason why he made one step and injured his foot. No, it's a happenstance. Things happen. It's a collision sport. Running back is a position where you're getting into 20-plus car collisions a game. It's not an easy position, so guys are going to get hurt. You have to, factor that in for any of these players, right? Dalvin Cook as well at number 4 overall. I have him at number 5. I'm super keen on Dalvin Cook, right? I think he's going to be a great play in this, this Rams-style offense you think we will see, Kevin O'Connell calling the plays, formerly with the Rams. But and then, and Austin Eckler, right? The touchdowns were huge this year. Can he continue that touchdown scoring pace? Probably not. There's going to be some regression in that regard. So I like all these guys. I think they're all reasonable plays. The top 4, I feel really confident in. I feel really confident in Joe Mixon at number 6. I'm less confident in Najee Harris at number 5. I have him at number 7. And I'm seeing DJ Sniper, or who is it? Scott Kobe. A ton of questions surrounding Najee with the line and QB. And that's the thing, right? I think that's what we're drafting. And I think that's also something you have to take into account. What are we chasing? What should we chase as fantasy managers? Are we chasing production, or are we chasing opportunities? Because, probably a combination of the two. But I think the opportunity should lead the way, right? If a player has the ball in his hands, the more he has the ball in his hands, the more opportunities he's going to get to produce, right? It's just that to me is the starting point. And I think all these players at the top of the list, Austin Eckler's, equity as a receiver has kept him locked in there. I think you can make that argument pretty easily for him, as well as McCaffrey. I think the lower end of this is where it gets super interesting. And I'm already seeing questions about some of these guys. DJ Sniper, says my friend the Guru, says Javonte at 2. That's a little aggressive. Sometimes we try to make a little wave. We try to make waves, and I'm not saying John Hanson doesn't fully believe that, but that would require certainly Melvin Gordon to be gone at the very least, right? And we don't know that that's going to be the case, right? Maybe he's splitting again, almost a 50-50 timeshare with Melvin Gordon, who seems to have a little more of a nose for the end zone. So, or did last year. That could change 100%, right? Touchdowns, the most volatile of all the statistics we look at are touchdowns, right? So keep that in mind. But I think so Alvin Kamara is the perfect example of touchdowns being volatile. Also, you're probably aware he has some off-field issues, arrested for battery or assault in Las Vegas. So he'll have to work that out. But also this offense has a lot of questions, and that probably explains why instead of being in the top 4, he's in the bottom 4 of the first round, right? I think it's perfectly reasonable if you want to avoid him. He was my prediction last year in the entire offseason. You guys might know this. We do magazines here. We do 5 of them. They're fantastic magazines. You should check them all out. The Pro Forecast, which has 2 editions. The cheat sheets, the draft book, and Football Diehards magazine, they are fantastic. They will be out on newsstands around August-ish, late July. But in those magazines, we try to predict really early what players are going to have are the most likely to be busts. It's not my favorite topic, right? Because I think if your first round busts it happens, but we're drafting guys in the first round because we think they're going to reach the high end. So if we're sitting here trying to predict, last year my prediction was Alvin Kamara. Here's why. Because Drew Brees had a long track record, certainly the entirety of Kamara's career in New Orleans, of throwing the ball to running backs almost 30% of the time. It's 28% of the time, to be precise. And I didn't know about these other guys, right? We saw at times last year, Taysom Hill, if he was going to be the starter, not known for targeting the running back, not known for targeting Alvin Kamara. Jameis Winston, more of a downfield thrower, right? So we didn't know what Michael Thomas's disposition would be at the time. I made this prediction, but his absence probably worked in Kamara's favor, yet still it wasn't his best season. So, and that was the reason why, right? Because I felt the opportunities would diminish. A lot of his value depended on his receiving numbers. And if those receiving numbers were, in my estimation, going to fall, that's why. I think that might be the case again this year. Turns out he's a very capable runner, as we all should have known. But still, there's reasons for concerns there. It's not other personnel, though, at this point. And that's something that we're dealing with Nick Chubb and with, I think to a degree, with Javonte Williams until we're not, right? That's a problem. For Austin Eckler, it would be great if they would throw in another guy. Austin Eckler will tell you this and has said it in multiple interviews. I know he was on Fantasy Dirt last week saying they hope they find a number 2 back. Maybe Justin Jackson started showing signs of being that guy, last year, but he's had kind of traditionally problems staying healthy. And again, I'm injury agnostic, but the fact still remains that he is, that he has struggled to stay on the field. So obviously can say the same about Christian McCaffrey right now. And probably many of you will. So Scott Kobe would like to know how many backs we're comfortable taking in the first 15 safe picks. So I mentioned Dempsey and I started doing, and you'll hear this if you tune into our Sirius show on Monday nights. We'll be doing like some mock drafts. We did our first one, 4 rounds, just me and Dempsey picking for all the teams. So the order in this one was Jonathan Taylor, Derrick Henry, Austin Eckler, Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook. Started mixing in the wide receivers here. Cooper Kupp, then Mixon, then Adams, then Harris, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Alvin Kamara, Kelsey, Hill, Williams, Diggs. So in the top 15, then Swift came next. So in the top 15, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It looks like about maybe 10, right in that range, Scott. I think that's pretty reasonable. Hi, Pedro. Thanks for coming in. Glad to help. Yes, and we will be around all off season. So I don't think that's going to be unusual. And I'll get into the wide receivers and tight ends next week in this chat, and they ask me anything. But I do think there are some wide receivers that merit some attention, and we'll talk about Travis Kelce too. I think Mike Dempsey drafted him in this draft, right at the turn, right after the turn. So I think people are still going to do that. The days or the seasons of Travis Kelce as a first-round pick might be over, but certainly not as an early second-round pick. He's getting older, but didn't show signs of falling down. Swift was the next back outside the top 10. In fact, he went ahead of Chubb in this draft, and Chubb was the 10th overall. Chubb is going to be a concern, right? Or, just in general, because he does play with Kareem Hunt. And if Kareem Hunt can stay healthy, you have to wonder, how much that's going to put a ceiling. I don't think it keeps Nick Chubb from doing what Nick Chubb does. And I think, we've seen it pretty much over the course of time. Number one, their quarterback isn't super great. Sorry, Baker. Don't get mad. But Kevin Stefanski's approach is he wants to run the football, right? It's a run-heavy attack, and Nick Chubb is the best pure runner on this team by far. Right? And all due respect to Kareem Hunt, who has been a very good back in the past, right? But he's a little, adds a little more as a receiver than Nick Chubb does. But Chubb is a great runner, and all the metrics, you look at the stats and break them down. He has been phenomenal, and I don't think that'll change. What did he finish this year? 12, and he's missed, 3 games with injury, so Nick Chubb is, for me, a super solid play. But I agree. I think DeAndre Swift is a guy you're going to see, kind of in that range of players that people are looking at. What about Cam Akers, right? I think, I saw on Fantasy Pros on the current consensus rankings, at least in PPR, maybe it's standard. It's one of the formats. I'll look so I don't sound like a total idiot here. Cam Akers, 7th overall in PPR, or 7th running back in PPR. I'm not sure I saw that in him. Like it's amazing that he came back, right? Amazing that he even made it back from that Achilles this year to play in the playoffs. It was remarkable. And he got a heavy workload. He didn't do a lot with it. Some of that was the matchups, right? The Buccaneers matchup, very tough. It turns out the Bengals, very tough against the run. So I'm not against it. I just think that's a little aggressive, but you'll see him in the mix up there, I'm sure. Cam Akers, David Montgomery will be a guy, but these are, I think these are all well outside the first round or the top tier of players. I think Swift is right up against the edge of that, and I think he could have a huge year as well, Scott, if he stays healthy. Pedro wants to know, playing in 1 point PPR seriously, everyone is a badass coach. They are. Thinking of going 4 top wide receivers with my first 4 picks and then settle on decent backfields. I think, so a lot of people do this, either a 0 or a modified 0 RB. People want to call it however you want to call it. Matt Waldman, when he started doing this 1,000 years ago, called it an upside-down draft. I mean, it's not necessarily a new development. It's not my cup of tea, but I do think, right, the argument is just quickly, Scott, Josh Jacobs, I'm maybe a little more solid on him than other people. I like him. Where did I take him? I took him end of the 3rd round. Elliott went in that range. I don't think that's unreasonable, right? I think he was about, probably once we got into that range, he is inside the top 20 running backs, and he probably should be, right? I mean, the workload's going to be solid, and we'll see. But I think, there's been some disappointments with him. I think he's probably going to be a value play that I get as a second running back, or if I do what Pedro's doing. And I don't think you can go 4 deep and then still land him, but maybe go 2 deep and still land him. Miles Sanders is another guy who, when he was on the field, was really good. And I think maybe he'll be a guy that offers a little value as well. Maybe more likely to get him, probably not in the 4th round, but I think maybe 3rd to 4th, but not after the 4th. So if you're going 4 receivers first, the thing about wide receivers is it seems like to us as fantasy managers that wide receivers, the downside's limited a little bit, right? In terms of injury risks, things like that. I don't disagree with that, but I do agree. My problem is, one of the reasons why running backs are valued so heavily is because they're Cordero Patterson. That's going to be a guy we have a hard time figuring out, right? But they're valued more heavily because they get the consistent, the ball in their hands consistently. Wide receivers tend not to. Cooper Kupp would like me to think that through again, right? So I get it. And I think, when you look at the wide receivers, again, we'll talk about them next week, but whether it's Kupp, Devontae Adams, Jefferson, Chase, however you rank those guys, Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs is still in that mix for me, right? Deebo Samuel's worked his way into that mix, right? But some of his was, seemed like anytime I see a player like Deebo Samuel, where a lot of that fantasy production came as a rusher, are they going to be able to duplicate that next year? Probably. I mean, we're all going to be drafting him too. So, I hope so. But anyhow, I'll get into the wide receivers next week. Is every Saturday and Monday official? Every Saturday and Monday for the Diehards show? Yes. And Sundays, at least until there's baseball. I don't know when they're doing that. But Robert Taylor brings up Patterson. I think the reason people are a little down on him, slow finish, and maybe we gain a little value from that because he was phenomenal, right? But his workload wasn't great. He just had to do a lot with it, kind of like Deebo Samuel, right? I mean, he had to maximize his workload, and he did. So he's going to be a player that I think people, will be eager to draft at the right price, and I will be at the right price. I just don't know what the hell that price is. In our initial 4-round mock that Dempsey and I did, this was on Monday night this past week, there was no Patterson in the first 4 rounds. Also, he has to remain a Falcon. He is an unrestricted free agent. I think they're going to try and keep him. But guys like Ezekiel Elliott, Josh Jacobs, who we mentioned, I think I like maybe Michael Carter's the name we should be talking about in that top 20 as well. And I probably will be more and more. So throw me a few more questions if you have them. Just in general, I think this is the Sirius host list is pretty solid. Again, I do have a couple departures from it. I'm a little higher on McCaffrey. I have him at 4, where he's at 7 in these rankings. And I get it. People are concerned about the injuries. I'm not going to say I'm not unconcerned. I'm just ignoring it. I don't care. To hell with it. I mean, I want that upside. If I'm drafting a running back, and I'm hoping I get some more shares of him because I'm not locked into taking him first overall. There's going to be drafts where he doesn't go until the second half of the first round, right? And I think that's probably as low as you'll see him go. But, I mean, like if he's 7 overall, if people really view him as 7th overall, and we see 3 or 4 wide receivers start going into the mix earlier in the draft, I mean, he's going to fall a fair amount. I mean, he's going to be pretty appealing to me. I want that upside. So I'm going to be looking at that. Is my feeling, Scott wants to know if I could get a stud wide receiver and Swift if you're picking late in the first round. Absolutely. And I think that was how this one played out. The one where Swift went, Devontae Adams went 8th overall, then Swift went on the turnaround, 5th player off the board in the second round. So I think that's not unreasonable. And look, he was phenomenal. If he stays healthy, he will be amazing as well. And I think, with Dan Campbell kind of had taken over, the play calling, at least philosophically, they'll have a new play caller in there. They promoted their tight ends coach, but it's going to be Dan Campbell's philosophy, right? And I think they'll use. I think there's no reason to believe they won't be using Swift heavily as we saw when he was healthy early last season. He's going to be a phenomenal producer if that's the case. Has my drafting strategy changed from 2021 or basically the same? I think maybe one adjustment is the band of quarterbacks I'll be willing to nibble on earlier is a little narrower, and probably 2 or 3 guys, and then I'll wait till a little later on quarterbacks beyond that. But other than that, and maybe tight end strategy shifted a little bit. I mean, it's easy to sit here and say I'm gonna get one of the top 2 or 3, and if not, I'm gonna punt completely. Punting completely is probably not that good of an idea based on last year. So. And I'll talk about this with the tight ends next week. But I mean, we always say, you can always find a guy. Well, yes, you can find a guy. Other people are doing the same thing. There are fewer of those guys, and it's a little bit of more of a crapshoot, or it proved to be this season, than I would have wanted. And so I'm hoping maybe a little bit that guys like Waller, who maybe disappointed people a little bit or fall a little down. One thing not to overlook when you're drafting on, the various sites is, if a guy had a lousy year, he's going to be down in the ADP ranks if that's how your draft software ranks him, right? Take advantage of that. If he's not on the radar there, people are going to maybe not draft him as early. I mean, some will, but so don't push it. But, take that into account as well. Are we going to do rookies? I'm not going to rank them separately here, but as they get teams, I'll dive into them. But as I mentioned earlier, Andrea, John Laub is reviewing all the rookies on the website, so go check that out. I think he does great work on these guys, studies them up well. So probably won't have them in these initial rankings, but we'll get them in there as soon as we start finding landing spots. Zeke killed me this past year, says Pedro. Oh, wait, JR has one. If Melvin Gordon is gone and Rodgers goes to Denver, where would you rank Javonte Williams? Probably same range. I mean, I guess they would pass a little more, but Melvin Gordon's gone and it would kind of balance it out a little bit. It seems, That's a lot of moving pieces. That's a lot of ifs, JR. Just thinking about it, I still I think he's a top 10, right? I mean, I think he remains a top 10 with or without Rodgers if Melvin Gordon is gone. Let's see. Oh yeah, we'll have Bloom on. We always do. And Matt Waldman as well. And Matt Waldman will be featured once again in the Pro Forecast magazine. Ooh. Yes. So Zeke killed me this past year, says Pedro. I picked him up 7th overall. When would you feel comfortable drafting him? He scares me even the 3rd round. The 3rd round is where he went at the tail end of the 3rd round, and Dempsey in my mock draft, initial mock draft. I think that's reasonable. Expecting a bit of a rebound from him. Look, he played with an injured PCL half of the season, right? So, expecting him to at least remain solid, but maybe Tony Pollard cuts into that workload a little bit more. So I don't think the 3rd round is way out of line for him. Maybe he slips into the 4th. It was the tail end, so I think that's fair. Is DeAndre Swift the guy for you that is outside the top 10 that will get into the top 10? He's certainly one of those guys. I think you could include David Montgomery, Miles Sanders. I mean, Elijah Mitchell's a guy that I like a lot. If he keeps that job, we know how it is in San Francisco, right? But if he keeps that job and he stays healthy all year, he could put up nice totals as well. Mike Valverde, a little concerned about Henry. Age, carries, coming off injury. I think all those things are concerned. So again, I'm going to diminish the coming off injury aspect of that. Seemed healed to me coming off, and it's so. I guess the thing is, and you can make this argument against Christian McCaffrey, Mike, and I know people do. I mean, there's a difference between chronically injured and a chronic injury and just being injured. And in Henry's case, he just got injured, right? It just happened, right? In Christian McCaffrey's case, you can make an argument that it's kind of a chronic condition with the hamstring. It's been 2 years now where the hamstring has been part of the issue. This year also the shoulder. So, I mean, there are guys, that have greater concern because of that, because of the extensive nature of the history. For me, Henry, I do agree. Age, workload, all those things are factors. I feel like, and I'm not alone in this, Eddie George would agree with me, and others. Others would totally disagree with me. Fabiano thinks I'm crazy on this. But I'm not going to worry about the workload as much in this case. He seems to be designed for it. He seems to do a good job of taking care of himself. At some point, is it going to catch up with him? Sure. But I mean, it almost seems like with first-round picks, I mean, you either need them to land and get the job done or they're going to fail you miserably. So I'm willing to take a chance on the upside for Henry. And same with McCaffrey, right? Again, I mentioned, it's like 30 points a game. That's a player and a half, right? I mean, that's worth something. Maybe even worth taking a risk in your draft. And remembering that when you're drafting and shoring up. And in this case, this year, maybe we have a clearer look if Deontay Foreman sticks around in Tennessee, that there's a clear-cut handcuff for Henry. And I wouldn't be against, spending a little bit more to acquire that guy, just like we are with Madison in Minnesota. And so I think, and we probably will, in Carolina. So yes. So yeah, there's concerns with all these guys I'm drafting in the first round, Mike. I think that's the thing. We should be concerned about any of these guys because, concerns are heightened because we're burning so much draft capital on them. Albert King or BB King? Have a great weekend. I like both the Kings. Both Kings. Probably if I had to pick one, it'd be BB, but Albert's probably the hipper answer. David Montgomery is the guy that goes under the radar at draft time that produces each year. I would agree with that, and we'll see what the new offense is. And, the question mark should not be there. No problem. All right, everybody. I'm going to call it a week here. We'll do this again next week. I appreciate your attendance. Appreciate you coming. Go to the Football Diehards website. We've got a ton of stuff up there, including John Lobb's rookie previews. We have the quarterbacks and part one of the running backs up there for you now, Andrea. Go check it out. Lobb is doing fantastic work. He always does. And he'll continue to do that. I think he's going to have some more articles, probably his next round of running backs going up early this week. So don't miss out. Thanks for coming, Mike. I appreciate it, man. Do it every week. I'd love to see you. And again, hit the subscribe button. Hit the like button if you liked me. Hit the dislike button if you thought I was horrible, because sometimes I am. And that's okay, too. Just like the feedback. And we'd like to build this channel up. Again, we're working on some things behind the scenes that you'll start noticing soon, and bringing in a little more interaction and maybe even getting some of you all involved with these videos, and looking forward to all that. So thank you very much. We'll see you next week.